Hi there, Megan Thompson with Megan Thompson Coaching, and today we are going to talk about one big mistake that I see many parents get stuck in if their sensitive kid is demonstrating a lack of resilience. All right, so let's dive in. Here at MTC, we help parents of highly sensitive kids eliminate daily meltdowns in as little as 8 weeks. And we help parents whose kids are yelling, hitting, kicking, screaming, throwing things, running away, just really seriously struggling with the day-to-day expectations, whether that be brushing their teeth, getting out the door on time, going into swim class, which is what we're going to talk about today, or moving through the emotional frustration that a sibling who shared their toys, without asking, is going to cause. And this can lead to knockdown, drag out fights. It can lead to frustration, overwhelm, sadness, all or nothing thinking, like life would be better off without me, or you're never fun, you never share, you never stand up for me, you love my sibling more than me. All of these self-deprecating and relationship-destroying statements are part of the meltdown cycle. And when you look at it from that angle, you notice that this is a relationship issue. We have a lot of people in the house, whether that be 2 or 5 or 7 or 9. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the meltdown cycle is part of the entire family dynamic, because you can't parent your kid in a silo. You can't have your child be the only focus who's melting down, even if it's a 2-person household, single parent and 1 kid. There's still life that happens. There's still your relationship to your boss and your commitments at work, and your child's relationship to their commitments at school or in the community that surround your mind when you're parenting your child, and surround your kids' relationships with themselves and you when they're parenting. So I always call the meltdown cycle a compassionate meltdown cycle, because when you're stuck in the middle of it, especially as a parent, you are wanting the best for your child. You want your child to be thriving. You want your child to be resilient. You want your child to see the bigger picture and to persist through their challenges. We know that the most successful children, successful people in the world, demonstrate a greater than normal experience of grit. Successful people have a greater than normal internal sense of grit. And this goes beyond any socioeconomic status. It goes beyond any level of intelligence. It goes beyond any level of life circumstances in terms of the communities that you grow up in. It goes beyond any racial differences. There have been serious studies related to resiliency that solve or control in those studies for all of these factors. And it's the internal experience. What allows people to move beyond their life circumstances and still be successful? It's an internal sense of grit. And so when we talk about that mentality that you could be stuck in for your child and with your child as a parent, you have to pay attention to whether or not you have an internal sense of grit and resilience, whether or not you frequently want to quit and throw in the towel mentally and just move into reactivity with your kid, because your kid can't move beyond your level of stress and overwhelm. And I know you've been at this for a long time. If your kid is 6, you've been dealing with meltdowns that are not developmentally appropriate for 2 straight years. Beyond age 4, daily meltdowns, even at 4, it's still the top of the length of the threshold here. We want to see 4-year-olds growing out of meltdowns by the time they hit 5, which means in general, most 4-year-olds aren't having meltdowns on a daily basis. And then moving all the way to, if you're parenting an 11-year-old, sheesh, right? We've got 7 extra years of meltdowns for your child that are not developmentally appropriate. You're tired. You're tired by the time you find me. I know that. Many of our clients say, you know what, like learning something new. I've been at this for 7 years, Megan. How can I learn more stuff, right? How can I consistently change this dynamic in 8 weeks? We have so many parents who wonder about this. And when they come into us, that's normal. That's normal. If you've had yourself for 30, 40 odd years, and then for 7 of them parenting and feeling tired and feeling like you don't really know how to break out of this cycle, you need to decide that you also can persist through challenges. You also can shift this with a better mentor and a better focus and a better process, just like that. And the understanding that you can change can absolutely change in the course of 2 months. And if you believe that that's true, great. For the next 2 months, divulge into all of my content. There's been years of it. Double down. Or if you want our help, get on the phone, right? You have choice in the matter. What's necessary for us to pay attention to on this conversation is whether or not your child can learn from you to persist through challenge. And I want to talk about the difference between holding your breath and waiting for it to be over and actually being mentally persistent, right? Because when you hold your breath and wait for something to be over, you're telling yourself, it's going to be over soon, it's going to be over soon, it's going to be over soon. This is a survival mode mentality. You might be tolerating your kids' big explosions with a survival mode mentality. You might be tolerating the stress with your boss with a survival mode mentality, yada, yada. Okay, I want you to notice that this problem is pervasive throughout every part of your life, even if you feel it, and you are successful at work. You feel like you're nailing it. You've got your life figured out in the workplace. Excellent. That's great. We have the vast majority of our clients are successful in every avenue of their life. They're meeting their outcomes at work, in the community. They're holding it down. They're even taking their kids to these fun experiences on the weekends and things like that. And yet they're suffering in silence at home with the meltdown cycle. And if that's you, I know it's because you're trying and hoping and working very hard to bust out of this pattern, and you're caring a lot about your child. You love your child. That's never a question to me. And your child is stuck. All right. So we're going to talk about this. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to pretend that it's going to eventually solve itself with a couple of new phrases to your child and validating feelings. It's not sufficient to solve this problem. One thing that I see is really the number one thing that parents get stuck in when you're helping your child build that persistence is in trying to help your child by encouraging them to see the big picture specifically. Okay. So this is important because when we're taking a very complicated problem, like a meltdown cycle with multiple family members, everybody plays on in it. Your other child who's watching is on your mind when you're dealing with your child who's freaking out. Okay. So whether you like it or not, you are managing multiple people in the household if you have multiple kids, or just you and yourself when you're a parent and you're a single parent in this household. Okay. So you and I both need to pay attention to that. I always set the foundation. What are we really talking about here? Because if we're making assumptions, and I'm assuming that you know what I know, before I get into how to change what you think you know, then it won't land. It won't land. You'll feel like, oh yeah, that's a really simple thing to do. Okay, great. Let me go do that. Try it for a week. It didn't work. Megan sucks, right? Like what I don't care what you think about me, but I want you to change your life. So let's focus on that. So let's focus on the piece that you're dealing with at this point, which is wanting your child to see the bigger picture when they are in the suck. Okay. They're saying, I don't want to go to swim class. I don't know how to handle it. When I get there, I freak out. We were coaching a client about this the other day. Her daughter was 4, okay, had some sensory challenges. The OT that they were working with before they came to our team was clearly identified. The child was highly sensitive and was basically just trying to teach the kid emotion management skills, even though they're an OT, so they're not taught emotion regulation. They're not taught mental health, but we see a big trend with a lot of OTs these days. And my OT on our team, she and I and our team were like, what's going on with this? thinking that they know how to teach emotion management and emotion regulation from a mental health standpoint when they're not trained in mental health. But there is some overlap for sure. I understand that earplugs can be useful for people who have auditory sensitivities that then compound their emotional sensitivities. Okay, so I'm a mental health provider. I've been working with OTs hand in hand for almost a decade by now, maybe older. Who cares who's counting? So I get that. Like I can get that. I can't explain the inner workings of the ear though, and how and why it works. So I'm not going to work on auditory sensitivities. I'm going to have an OT on my team, right? And this is why we do this for OT consult with our focus, because a multidisciplinary focus helps the meltdown cycle shift faster, right? I want a little bit of a soapbox there, but I want you to be discerning when you're working with professionals for your kid, whether that's us or not. You need to know what it takes to turn this around. Okay, so we're talking about the parent who came to us. All right, they're still working with us. They're in our 8-week program, and they're a couple weeks in, and they determined that the child no longer needs that local support because it was not just redundant but also insufficient. And as they're phasing that out, and they decided that with both the provider as well as with our consultation and their own, gut, mama gut, data gut understanding, we've learned way more in these couple weeks than that we've learned in the last several months with this provider. Okay, so it's a natural decision with all parties involved to extinguish the work and really double down on what's necessary. Now, obviously, with a kid who's going to indoor swimming, the situation is not the best for a sensitive kid to begin with. They have a assembly line with multiple classes running, and they're just going station by station. This poor sensitive kid, 4 years old, like doesn't really love swimming in a pool to begin with. She's a lake kid, right? As mom describes her, and it's an indoor pool. We've got the sensory overwhelm of the noise going on in the indoor pool. Everybody hears the echo, right? You can pay attention to that. We're also paying attention to the fact that there's a ton of people. It's a new experience. This child's stuck in the meltdown cycle, so she's constantly overwhelmed. She's constantly overstimulated. She's a wallflower by nature because she's stuck in the meltdown cycle. So she's got all of these side effects of the meltdown cycle sticking out in this circumstance, and she's in a situation, in an environment where the parents are like, oh man, if we knew this is how they ran their swim school, like we never would have signed her up. Even having just worked with you for a couple weeks now, Megan. And I'm like, that's fine. How long is the class, right? So we figure out the class is actually 6 days straight and then they're over, right? So we set the expectation and we observe, and mom's expectation was, we're just going to hope she doesn't lose it mentally and make our way through the class, right? And if she's there, present for the moment, for the entire time, even if she's crying in the corner, we've won. And I said, wait a minute, like that's the lowest of the low. We want to stop the meltdowns because she was having meltdowns the first 2 days of class. She was losing it for 30 minutes. Poor thing. Like my heart goes out. Obviously, mom and dad are heartbroken. The setup is like the parents are behind a wall. So the kid can't see the parents. So we've got, all kinds of separation fears going on for a young child, which part of that's developmentally appropriate for a 4-year-old, right? We've got a preschooler here, and but not at the extreme, right? We still wouldn't want sensitive kids to be having meltdowns in a new situation, especially not multiple days in a row. We have to address this, okay? So we teach the parents to start much smaller than what they were doing. What they were doing, and this is what we see so many parents working on, is they see the big picture. Sweetheart, learning to swim is going to be amazing, right? This is an example. I'm not going to quote them word for word because confidentiality, right? But this was basically what the parents were conveying. Once you learn how to swim, it's going to be awesome. You really want to learn how to swim. So the big picture outcome, as high-performing perfectionists that they are, and most of our clients are, as I am a high performer, but no longer a perfectionist. And they're thinking about the big picture, the visionary, right? Outcome here, and painting that perspective. Now, for the child, that is still a child-focused goal. Okay, so I'm not saying the parents are not develop, they're not taking their child's development into consideration. They've definitely been working at this for a long time, learning about child development, paying attention to this mentality here. And so they're definitely still very present to the child's desires and trying to help the child's be led by her desires. Here's the thing. With sensitive kids who are stuck in fears, we broke down the fact that she has her blinders on. There is something going on in that environment that is literally tuning out all of the emotional intensity. And this child was not actually refusing before she got in the door. She was excited, happy-go-lucky. She had different blinders on, right? Part of the meltdown cycle is your kid isn't insightful. They don't really see when they're going to have a challenge and really see when they're going to have a challenge and what they're going to do about it, right? So your child might be thinking into the future and anxious and saying, I can't know, won't know way. Or your child might be happy-go-lucky until the moment happens and they're just flooded with lack of skill and flooded with lack of insight. It's devastation and all bets are off, right? So sensitive kids can respond in either dynamic in any setting. You might see both of these situations in different settings with your kid. You might think that those are two different problems. No, they're the same problem. So we've got lots of clarity here from this conversation already. I hope that what I want you to take away is that your child's behavior, what they do right before a hard event and what they do right during a hard event, is not the definition of where they're stuck. It is a symptom of where they're stuck. Okay? That's one takeaway I want you to take away from this situation. Now, obviously, I had a conversation with mom. We had this conversation during the day. Dad was the one who was going to take the kid straight from preschool to swim class, right? So some of what I taught was going to need to be taught after today's swim class, and so that we would be proactive for the day after, right? One of the things that we were focusing on is looking very narrowly at the child's experience, moving her through step by step by step by step, what skills she needed, helping the parents understand what skills she needed so that she could be regulated on the way to the event. So her excitement and her imagination wasn't clouding her realism during the event when it was stuck for mom and dad, and how she could picture herself and presume that she can handle it. And then throughout the event, when the teachers are like, come on, it's going to be great. And they're speaking in a high-pitched voice, like, cheerleader Sally, rah, rah, sis, boom, bah, everything's awesome, which for a sensitive kid who doesn't have emotion management skills, that's still overstimulating, even if it's positive, right? The kid can't ride the high of that emotional intensity unless they're already feeling excited about something. So that was overwhelming to the child. Then we had the issue with the swim class being only a couple of days. So how much is the parent really going to advocate with these teachers that they're never going to see again, because they're not going to send that kid to level 2 in that setting? We assessed this is not a great long-term way for your daughter to learn, but let's make the most of the class that we signed up for, right? And how do we do that? We don't just shrink the expectations. We don't shrink the world. The child's world was already quite shrunk. Mom was reducing expectations and reducing things she had signed up for the kid for, reducing her world. We call it shrinking the world that the child was expected to engage in because of this problem in the first place. So I wasn't going to help them perpetuate that belief by just seeing if the kid could sit in the corner crying softly instead of screaming and sobbing and melting down. But that's not what we're looking for as success. We walked them through step by step, shrinking the child's world, helping the child, shrinking the child's perspective so that we didn't shrink the child's world, okay? And in that, we helped the child feel confident in the moment when she knew what she could focus on in that very moment of stepping from being with parent to being without parent. And that allowed her to slow herself down. Sensitive kids are very observant and very capable swiftly when they have the support and the therapeutic shift happen through their parents. I've never met this child. 2 days later, so that, like I said, the first day, mom was translating the information to dad before dad got to watch the replay of our coaching session and then could acclimate to the skill set. They could do the entire play-based activity that I had prescribed for them to engage in with their daughter at home once they actually had that time. Guess what? So let's say, for example, I talked to them on a Wednesday. She had already had Monday, Tuesday. She was sad. Wednesday's class, she was less sad. Thursday's class, she went through it because they did the thing that I taught, the play-based activity that I had prescribed based on the child's needs, based on the child's overarching perspective, and then also what the child was capable of based on my assessment in our direct conversations, and also parents' skill sets. I taught the parents how to teach the child to playfully be resilient in a particular activity and practice that at home with mom and dad. And then also taught something that dad could do to hold her over and reduce the intensity, because Wednesday they still had the class to do. Thursday, mom celebrated in our group that the child went through swim class. So then she had Thursday successfully going through swim class, and the opportunity for Friday and Saturday to also be successful. So halfway through this exceptionally overwhelming class, we have the kid moving through it. All right. Like I said, parents decided they're going to find a different swim class for the next levels. And we have the child persisting through challenge. What happens when our kids don't persist through challenge and they quit, or we decide to help them quit for them when we pull them from class? Is there's a part of the brain that there much more new studies. You might have heard this, and it's a buzzword, okay, right now, because there's new research focused on this. We've got the front of the brain, prefrontal cortex, in a part of the brain in the front of the brain that's focused on decision making, as well as willpower, is the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. And that part of the brain is strengthened, right? We call it what fires together wires together, a different framework here. It's strengthened when somebody persists through challenge. And so when we're focusing on this for your child, we can't go into the broad picture of they either do it and then they feel happy at the end, which is 6 days later for a 4-year-old. That's torture. Or they don't do it and we wait till later, right? If we pull them from the class, then we're telling their brain to shut down, and shutting down means I don't have to do this, which means I'm fragile, which means I'm broken, which means I can't. And my brain rehearses that, right? So when we teach parents to rewire the brain for success, for playful resilience, the child can playfully expect themselves to know how to tolerate this challenge. The child then feels playful in the experience, feels curious enough to be present to the moment in this overstimulating experience like swim class. And then as a result, boom shakalaka, in that very same week, we see progress. That's what I'm talking about. That kid did not have to ride it out and wait. That kid did not need the sunshiny, college student teacher saying, it's going to be great, don't you think so? Putting on a show, right? That kid didn't need chastisement. Don't you see all the rest of your friends? They're having so much fun. Why don't you want to have fun? Look at the furrow of the brow even if you're watching my show today on a screen. Kid's going to get mixed messages from that. Feel shame, right? None of that is necessary for sensitive kids. Sensitive kids, in order to feel resilient, they need to feel playful. Play is the natural language of children, not conversation. Anxious children talk. Relaxed children play. So you need a new skill set, because if all you're doing is talking to your kid about how they can think about it differently, then you are engaging your child's anxious brain when you are wanting them to feel relaxed, and that's not going to work. So I'll be blunt with you. I'll be direct. I don't need you to be comfortable with this. I want you to change. So it's not my job to keep you comfortable. It's my job to help you change your life. So if you want more support in figuring out what will be useful for you to change your life, then I encourage you to book a call with my team. We will help you help your child change their experiences. It will take some very hard work. Our hard work might not be right for your family. I'm happy to help you find a better fit for local providers if that's a good fit instead, or if you need to take some serious action before working with us is more appropriate. If any of that is the case, then I will tell you on that same call. I do it every week, all right? When I take calls regularly, if my team's not the only ones taking calls, I certainly send people on a different path working with me than working with me on a weekly basis. It is so incredibly important that I only work with people I know I can help, because I don't like to work inefficiently. or be tired when I come to work. I'll leave that up to my baby. She keeps me tired enough. All right. So again, go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk, have a conversation with myself or my team, and we'll help you break it down. Okay. We'll help you notice exactly where you're stuck, where the challenges are, how you're leading your child in this struggle, whether or not that also needs to change. And then lastly, what the goals you have are for your family, and whether or not my team can help you break out of this challenge. Now, sensitive kids change through their relationship with their parents. So we will absolutely be working on discovering where you're stuck in your relationship with your child. That is the vast majority of our focus here. It will feel tricky. It will feel hard, but it will also feel very empowering to have that deep conversation with somebody who knows what they're doing. And like I said before, happy to send you with a plan or a strategy if it's not working with us. That's exactly what we need to do. And it's the only way that we're going to maintain our high success rate here at MTC. So encourage you to really be working on what I've taught and what we've got as the takeaways today. Put this into practice. Make sure that you have the skill sets that your child needs in order to build their own skill sets. And again, that free call, meganthompsoncoaching.com/chalk. The link is below this show or in the show notes if you're listening to us on the podcast here. And have a wonderful start to your summer. Bye now.